This one, if you notice, take a look at it. This one has a third axle, so it's a little bit different than what we're normally going to see. This is about 20,000, 30,000 range on weight. Cabs on this thing are not heavily reinforced. We're not going to run into a lot of the exotic metals like we run into like the high-end cars, just like that in the street these days. So access into this cab, if we have to make access, is not going to be a real issue for us. So conventional tool is something that works just fine. We need to shut the motor down on this rig. It's just an ignition key, just like all your cars. Start the key off, the motor will die. If for any reason the cab is crushed, we can't get access to that ignition. Take a CO2 extinguisher and locate the intake for the motor, and dump your CO2 into this intake. It'll choke out the motor will stop. That's something we may want, it may not be something we want. So, motor's running, it's also building air, right? A lot of air systems on these trucks, air for the brakes, air for the suspension. We lose air pressure on this, what can we expect to happen? It won't roll, because we all know that in the absence of air, our brakes engage, right?
Red Rainbow 63.
So, brakes will engage, not usually a bad thing for us. The suspension is where we run into a problem. So now we have no control over that suspension anymore. Air systems inherently are going to have leaks. Airlines can be damaged in the accident. They can be severed. If that's the case, it's probably already going to drop down on us before we even arrive. The suspension can travel as much as 4 to 6 inches. So, like I said, if we leave that thing building air pressure, if we can get some stabilization under this and control that load. We can dictate when that suspension comes down. So we'll get our stabilization in place, and then we can kill the motor, and we don't have to worry about that shifting and moving on us. The cabs on these trucks are also suspended on air. There's 2 airbags in the back. It's hinged in the front. So this cab will hinge back and forth like this for comfort, for ride comfort. That's also going to drop. 2-4 inches probably. Bags are pretty small on this one. That affects us if we're working around this cab. So if we're underneath this for any reason, we got tools under here, we're under there, we're standing up here, we got our toes under here, just come down on our feet. So we want to stop that from coming down. Real easy way to control that, like everything else with cribbing. Come back around the back side here, get a piece of cribbing in here. And this one I probably need a wedge to take up that dead space, but it'll settle down in that cribbing, and now we control that. Cab's not extremely heavy, so it's not going to worry. We don't have to worry about this metal crushing or deforming on us and coming down past the cribbing. It's going to catch it where it is and it'll stay in place. A lot of times on accidents, if it's a significant enough impact, these cabs will actually be either tossed off or rearranged sideways off the frame. That's because the mounts, there's only 3 mounts, 4 at most. It's hinges on the front and then bolted to those airbags on the back. So there's not a lot of fortified structure on this to keep that cab attached to the frame. Whereas like we get our full frame vehicles, Suburbans, pickup trucks, things like that, you're looking 6, 8 body mounts from bumper to bumper. Fuel tanks on this truck specifically, we're looking at 150 gallons on each side. Diesel fuel, which we know is not a huge hazard, but it does make things dangerous for us. If this is ruptured, we got one tank that's got a rupture in it, it will create a siphon. So now you're not dealing with just 150 gallons that's damaged, it's pulling from that other tank. So like if it's full, we got 300 gallons to worry about. The best move is to come to the top of the tank, locate the fuel line. There should be a shut-off valve. It's a quarter turn. Shut them both down. Maybe a little T-handle like this, could be a lever, might be a knob, but you're going to find some type of valve on this saddle tank to shut the fuel off nicely like that. Around the back of the cab, every semi is going to have, tractor's going to have at least 2 air lines and a power line for electric coming off of the back. This one also has 2 hydraulic lines that run off the PTO on the tractor, and that's going to be for operating any type of accessories that the trailer may have. Could have a dump body, could have a gooseneck, could have hydraulic systems. Right now this is coiled up because the step deck doesn't have any hydraulics on it. Come back to our air lines. The blue is going to be your service brakes. So this is what operates the brakes when you press the pedal going down the road. Red's going to be your suspension and a parking brake, your trailer brakes. If we want to take that air out of play, bleed down the air suspension and lock the brakes. Just lift up, comes right off. So when you take this off, this one the air is leaked out. Usually you take this off, you're gonna quick rush of air, and it'll hiss for a little while. Once it gets down low enough in pressure, the check valve will engage, and this will stop bleeding air. If we need to put air back into this for whatever reason, maybe we need to put air into suspension, we want to get a little lift out of it. Put it right back on like that. There's a rubber seal on each side of this. Just press it against it, makes a seal and locks the air in. Electricity is just for your lights. That comes right off. Just pull on that and it'll come right out.
You can take these off under pressure, so it won't hurt you. We're moving back here. We want to hit the seat.
So, this cab here is called a day cab. This is just for guys doing 9 to 5 hauling, run around town, local delivery stuff. So comfort's not a real big issue for them. They're not limited in this thing. So the guys who respond to accidents on the highway, you may encounter sleeper cabs. So you have a big bump out back here with a bunk in it. Make sure you get access to that. If there's an accident, the cab's involved. There could be someone sleeping in there. Usually, there's always a driver, but there may be another person back there. It could be they run tandem. Sometimes they just alternate driving and sleeping, running across country. It might be a spouse, or it could be a pet back there also.
Pounds there. The whole deal is going to be at least probably 80,000 pounds. So it can go upwards to 150,000 pounds with special permits. So if you see wide load or any kind of chase vehicle with it, chances are you're dealing with a pretty heavy load. Standing next to Derek there, that's called a drop axle, and this is air actuated. So it's being held up right now by air. It's actually sinking right now because this truck leaks. So this will touch the ground in another couple hours. So what they'll do when they get a real heavy load, they'll adjust the trailer, bringing it forward, and then they'll drop that wheel, and then the weight ratio to axle will be where it's supposed to be. So like I said, if you see a triple axle like this, it's probably got a pretty heavy load. If it's an open step deck like this, you can see the load obviously, but if it's a regular box trailer, you won't know what's in there. So just assume that you're dealing with a lot of weight. So going back to the weight, 80,000, 150,000 pounds. Most of us have 42s. I know Displays has got some Paratex. On the 42s, does anyone know the max capacity that it will hold? It's 18,000 pounds, roughly. So we're obviously way under the number that we need. So we're of course we're still going to use them. We just got to exhaust our resources. So officers, this is a part where you would you want to get more rigs, more supplies. So you got a couple resources around you that got cribbing, struts, call them in. Even if you don't need the people. This is my boss.
This is the guy who drives this truck.
Down my truck yet?
Lost train of thought. So you got struts. A big resource is the tow companies. Linmar was nice enough to let us use this truck. They also have a lot of equipment. If you let them know right away what you got, be pretty detailed with what you need. They can bring out a rotator, they got booms, they got all kinds of stuff. Low pressure airbags, medium pressure. It'll lift a lot of weight, and they know how to use it. So keep that in mind. You have that resource. Talk about landing gear. This right here. We'll show you how to use it when we're on the other side. But landing gear is designed to stabilize an empty trailer. So never trust this to hold the load that it's carrying. You still have to crib. In other words, this is not be all and all. You can lower it, or sometimes, a lot of times, the driver, if he's able to, he will lower it. But there's several different kinds out there. This is a hand crank one with a gear ratio in it, which we'll explain. They got hydraulic. They got some that are just pins that drop down. And they put it in the closest hole, and then they use the air suspension on the trailer to lower it on top of the gear. So you'll see those a lot of times on gravel trucks, 6-wheelers, things like that. But if you're dropping this down, you got to really be careful as to what you got underneath you. On a hot day, if you got a heavy load on this, it's going to shoot right through that blacktop. So you got to be careful with that. We suggest you put cribbing down. That way it'll displace some of the weight. It's better than nothing, but just keep that in mind, because then you could have a whole nother problem when you disconnect from the trailer or the tractor, you know, of a tipping issue. All right, moving back farther down, about 4 to 6 inches. This side's coming down as well. A quick temporary solution to this is if you leave the truck running, it's obviously building up air. But if for whatever reason it's not, and you still have a chance to get a piece of cribbing in here, again, it's temporary because you're on top of a tire. I realize it's not ideal, but it's going to buy you a little time to build a real cribbing tower, you know, somewhere where you have good access to cribbing. So they talk about putting airbags and things in there. We're not going to get into that, but it's just another thing that you can do. So a piece of cribbing in there is going to buy you some time. We're coming around to the back. The back of trailers and trucks, for that matter, are dangerous areas. I'll show you why. They have this bar here. This is on all trucks. This is a step trailer, so it's low. If you look at semis when you're driving home today or tomorrow, look at the semis. You'll see a bar down there. It's designed. It's called the DOT bar. It's designed to prevent an underride, cars from going underneath. It's not high tensile strength steel. It's thick steel though. It's about 1/2 inch, 3/8 inch thick. So it's kind of a well, it's not kind of. It's a pain in the ass to cut with our cutters. You're going to be using, you know, grinders or your sawzall will work. Just takes a while. If for some reason we have to cut it, spreaders, things like that will work. But the dangerous part about the trucks is you got the airbags in the back, and you got the brake chambers. Brake chambers being more dangerous. Brake chambers, think of it's a round, solid. It looks kind of like a ball, and it has a compressed spring in it. And what happens is when the air is applied to it, it compresses the spring. When it's not, it opens. So if we hit it with our tool, we displace it while we're spreading something, and that thing's under energy, it has the chance of shooting that spring in a direction where we could be standing. These ones are pretty low and they're parallel to the ground. Doesn't mean it can't ricochet off something on the trailer and hit us if we compromised it, but it's something you want to think about. If you look at dump trailers, even semis, they're up higher. So dump trailers, they're right at almost face level and they're angled towards you. So if they do go, it's most likely going to hit you where you don't want to get hit. The airbags are not as dangerous. They will blow up. It'll scare you. They're pretty loud. But where we see those go off and the chambers is axle fires. So we've all been on overheated brakes that start small fires, and we think it's kind of no big deal because it hasn't gotten into the trailer or the vehicle itself. But it could activate or it could explode the chamber or an airbag. So something to think about. They talk about, I know this is controversial, but they say the safest spot for that situation is right in front of the tire. I mean, not right on it, but in front of it. I'll tell you, the best thing you can possibly do is just get water on it, cool it down, and prevent it from exploding. Derek's going to show you what they look like. We'll start with the brake chamber.
Those are bad. It's bad news right there.
Brake chamber.
So right there, I'm pointing right at it. So this one's pointed up and towards the front. But they all look the same, just like that. It's like a metal dome. We found on the driver's side, just for ease for the operator. This one's, like you said, it's gear driven. It's a 2-speed gearbox on it. On this one, it just happens to be counterclockwise to lower. There's no standard for that. So I'll see the foot coming down. That's in high speed. If I pull this out, I'm now in low gear. And you will see this is extremely painfully slow. So the concept being, we wanted to drop this gear. Obviously, we'd use high gear, make contact with the ground. If we wanted to lift this trailer off of the fifth wheel, we'd have to switch to low. You're not going to get anywhere in high gear with a load on this trailer. So you come out to low gear, if we actually have to lift it, now we'd be able to lift it. A lot of times, if you got a trailer fire, even an axle fire with a brake spot fire, the driver may be out here already dropping this and trying to pull away from his trailer because he's going to want to save his tractor and just lose the trailer instead of losing everything. So I'd have no problem with letting him pull away. Come back here to the fifth wheel. So the fifth wheel is where the trailer attaches to the tractor. And everyone's seen unloaded tractors going on the road. There's a big disc on top there. It kind of looks like a horseshoe with a slot in the middle. That's where the kingpin for the trailer comes in. Goes in that slot, sits on there, locks in place. And that trailer will just pivot on top of there. If we ever had to release this for any reason, just come around here, front side of that fifth wheel, and there's a handle to pull. Now right now it's released. We pulled out the last time. If I got to reset this, I got to actually back the tractor up into it to get it to grab again. But this one's out, so you pull this handle, it'll release. If you have any guess about whether it released or not, there's a bolt sticking out the front of the fifth wheel with a nut on it. If it's engaged, that'll be flush against the fifth wheel. When I released it, it'll come out about 2 inches. So that'll be an indicator that you've released it. These tracks here that we talked about, all these teeth, are positions that we can move that fifth wheel front and back in order to distribute the load over these axles. So if you got something real heavy, we want a little more forward, put more weight to the steer axles. So you see the guys driving down the road with a little car and a heavy trailer, the front wheels are up in the air. Same thing applies to these, so they can either distribute that weight, want to keep the ratings within spec for the axles and be compliant, and also to give them better handling and control of the rigs.
Driver, just like if we're going into a building, the engineers know what's going on. Your driver's going to be your best bet as to how stuff works, things like that. If they're unconscious or they're hurt or whatever, up in the cab, there'll be a bill of lading. It should be right here. It's the papers for the truck. It's going to tell you what they're hauling. So if it's a hazmat or something like that, you want to know. It tells you weights, all that kind of stuff. It's not a bad idea when you get a situation like this that your officer does it like in a house fire at 360. So he's going to see what needs to be stabilized, what's going on. While you're doing that 360, come in and hurry up, grab them papers, give them to the battalion, and then get the ball rolling. That's also when you would call a tow truck company to come out and help you. You want to get that done as fast as you can. So Derek's going to talk about the batteries and the brakes, and then we'll move on to the bus.
So on all of our rigs that we drive that air brakes, we got a yellow parking brake, air brake engagement. This one will have two, so the yellow and a red. So the yellow will be for the tractor brakes, and your red's gonna be for your trailer brakes. Now, we've been informed by our truck everybody that a lot of times that these drivers won't even use the trailer brakes, so it wouldn't be surprising if they're not engaged. So if we want to engage them, we can either pull that air line or just set them through here if we have access to that. Batteries are going to be found kind of like our ambulances in the step area. The cut electric to the tractor. Ignore all the jumpers. Go back to where the cables come to the battery bank. Find your negative, take that off.
Any questions with the truck? We went through a ton of information really quick, but we gotta get moving. So, all right, let's go over to the bus.